Okay, look, this is a 40-minute podcast, and it kind of sucks, but it kind of sucks because there's an awful lot of, uh, I'm going to get better, but I wanted to put this disclaimer up front. There's a lot of, and, um, and, uh, so I didn't go as far as create a counter because that would have taken hours. I will get better. There will be less and less there's also a lot of outtakes, which I have saved, and maybe at some point I'll put together a blooper reel, but good God, you've been warned. So without further ado, please try and enjoy this episode. Thanks. Bye. Welcome to the Knowledge Stack Podcast. I'm your host, Jason. Thank you for joining me. Today's episode, we're going to talk about where I get my knowledge from. This is the Knowledge Stack Podcast, so clearly there has to be knowledge. I get my knowledge from podcasts, news feeds, the internet, really anywhere I can get information. I'm very much a person that likes to consume vast amounts of knowledge. I'm not the expert at really anything. I would firmly place myself in the jack of all trades but master of none category when it comes to knowledge about just about anything. I know enough to know that I don't know enough about anything. So, in my effort to constantly grow as a human, as a intellectual individual, hate using that word. I like to consume knowledge about a broad range of subjects, from the mundane to the very, very, very hyper specific. So, my YouTube feed is fraught with a ridiculous range of topics. So, we can certainly talk about some of those things. But before we get into that, I wanted to kind of go over some three very interesting articles that I've come across in the last couple of days. Monday, Elon Musk's XAI is going to debut Grok 3 to the world. It's going to be demoed for the public. I don't entirely know what that means. If you've seen any Elon Musk um, earnings call or demo, it's a lot of times a ton of smoke and mirrors and a lot of jazz hands. He talks a good talk, but a lot of times his releases are very much not releases. It's very much vaporware. Having said that, he has invested a ton of money in building and training this model. His obviously, you have to take that with a grain of salt, but his position is that it's right now the smartest LLM that's out there. So he's got a lot of competition. DeepSeek is the new kid on the block. There's been a lot of news about DeepSeek and its effectiveness, being able to train a very complex and a very responsive model with uh, modest compute resources. In recent days and weeks, there's been a lot of information that may contradict the folks at DeepSeek with what it actually took to train their model. So that, I'm sure, is going to be a continuing story to follow. Um, what is the state of play of AI in general? AI is obviously referring to artificial intelligence. It's we're very much in an arms race with regard to AI. The heavy hitters, which I would include ChatGPT from OpenAI. I would include the Llama 3 models from Meta. I would include Google's models, and there are a second tier of models right beneath them that are really excellent at certain modalities, whether that's image recognition, image generation, code generation. reasoning, just general knowledge. There's a ton of areas of specialization within the AI space. But the larger models that have sort of their different flavors are the ones that garner most of the news. Um, where is it going? I don't know. We keep throwing compute more and more and more compute resources at these things to try to make them smarter. Are the machines on the verge of taking over? Probably not. But there is definitely the need for some governance around the AI and the safe and responsible application of AI. I don't know that the Department of Government Efficiency is the best place to put that. Certainly, there probably needs to be a much broader panel of individuals or groups or committees that will evaluate the effectiveness and safety of some of the safeguards that can and should be put in place to ensure that the AIs are used responsibly. I don't know what that looks like, but it's certainly something that everyone likes to talk about, but you don't see a whole lot of action. And I can't say that I blame, a lot of these organizations. Nobody is going to disarm unilaterally. Someone's not going to quote unquote cripple their AI model because it's a competitive race. We're trying to get eyeballs. We're trying to become the most popular, the most heavily used AI model out there, and by restricting what can and can't be done on your particular model, you may lose out, in this arms race. So I don't anticipate anyone is going to disarm unilaterally, but I also don't think that there's um, any motivation for any of these organizations to um, throttle back and put in some safeguards. I don't expect that the individuals running these organizations that have developed these models will sit back and wait for government, whatever that looks like, world or national interests, um, to put in place those safeguards. So I wouldn't imagine in the next 4 years to see a whole lot of um, regulation or safeguards put in place to protect the general public against whatever threats AI may um, present. Now, will AI be disruptive? 100%. Will people lose their jobs as a result of AI? 100%. In fact, it's already happened. You've seen um, a lot of uh, a lot of companies have figured out that you can apply a large language model to increase efficiency and automate processes that were traditionally done by entry level or, in some cases, mid level full time employees. So um, it's there's going to be some AI growing pains. It's going to take some time to really determine what's what with AI, but we're still in infancy, even though AI has been around for quite a while. Um, we don't necessarily know what all of the impacts are going to be with AI. Um, in general, I see AI as a net benefit, but I do see that there are risks in my industry, in the credit union space and in information technology. There's certainly a lot of vendors and a lot of sales reps that like to communicate that their systems are AI enabled and AI aware and AI, AIO. Um, AI is a very specific term, but there are a lot of ways to skin the AI cat. Um, Simply having AI in your system does not necessarily make it better, more efficient, smarter than any other system. Um, There are also some information security concerns around AI. If you're deploying an AI system that gathers, in my case, member or customer information, where is that information stored? If you're looking for the latest and greatest and you partner with a vendor that uses DeepSeek, those servers are controlled wholly by the CCP. So your information is in China. While a growing number of the youth today don't really care if TikTok or DeepSeek or whoever has their data and does whatever they want with it, not everyone is comfortable with that. That information can be used for a lot of nefarious purposes, and um, we've seen over the years, the last few years, a lot of information about um, attempted subversion of our political system by, foreign actors. That information is used for those types of purposes. Knowing, a little bit more about how people interact with each other, with systems, with computers, with their merchants like Amazon, all of that information is incredibly valuable. So there are a lot of people that are uncomfortable with that. And as a result, what we've seen is there are a lot of um, there are a lot of LLMs that you could run locally with modest amount of compute resources. So there are a number of open source platforms that make it very easy to deploy large language models locally. They're nowhere near as competitive as or as smart as your Chat GPTs or your DeepSeeks or your Groks probably or your Llama models, but um, with a relatively modest amount of compute, which would mean, having a server with adequate CPU resources, a dedicated GPU that will run those models, you can approximate a lot of what those models will do. It's not a panacea. It's not going to, instantly make every person in your organization smarter, but you could consume a lot of data, manuals, documentation, training materials in a local model and make it a lot more responsive and a lot more customized than a public model could be. The benefit of that is the model is stored locally. It's not something that requires access to the internet. It's not something that you run into an issue with custodian of member or customer data in a data center in an area of the world or country that you don't have control over. So there's a lot of interesting information about using open source projects like Olama to run local LLMs, and I would certainly encourage you to look into those things. You can run them on your local PC at home. Granted, again, you need a certain level of compute to make that a pleasurable experience, but it's surprising the amount of um, information that's out there on running these models locally. So definitely take a look at some of those things. The second article that I saw was about a Boeing Airlines. I hate Boeing. Uh, Boeing um, is dumb. I don't know any other way to frame that. It is it is one of two in a duopoly that can't seem to figure out how to not shoot themselves in the foot from their planes not being airtight and opening in midair, which is insane, to all of the issues they had over the last, I would say, 10 years with pretty much any new aircraft that they've tried to deploy, to the comical Air Force One replacement saga. In Trump's first term, he negotiated a ridiculous contract with Boeing to build the next two Air Force One replacements. Um, in Trump fashion, he negotiated a ridiculously low priced contract that um, at least in the eyes of the current CEO, was impossible to build two of the most sophisticated aircraft ever, with all of the military countermeasures, all of the avionics, all of the nuclear insulated, protected systems that are required for Air Force One. And the original delivery date of the first of two aircraft was supposed to be 2024. It's going to be 2027 now. But what I find interesting is the article itself. Trump had apparently gone to Miami-Dade Airport to tour a Boeing aircraft, which is odd because I'm pretty sure Trump has a Boeing aircraft. I don't really understand the purpose of the article. He toured a Boeing aircraft which appears to have been, at least at some point, owned by the royal family of Qatar. I don't know how you say that country. It might not have even been Qatar, but I don't understand. Did he get on the plane and look around and get off? He's been on a Boeing aircraft before. He's been on a 747 before. Air Force One is a 747. So, with all of the sophisticated avionics and all of the technology that needs to go into the new Air Force One, I'm just wondering why he's rolling up to essentially a 15-year-old aircraft that, for all intents and purposes, is nothing like what the new aircraft is going to be. So I found it odd that there was an article, and I assume this is the Trump effect. If Trump is doing a thing, people want to know about the thing, no matter how stupid it is. Um, so yeah, so there was this very odd article about Trump and his tour of a Boeing aircraft. It seems like a giant pile of nothing, but there was a news article about it. Boeing is annoying to me because over the past year, uh, Boeing Airlines stock, I own shares of Boeing Airlines. Sadly, you would think that a company that is one of two in a duopoly for essentially every aircraft. You've got essentially Airbus and you've got Boeing Airlines. Um, you would think they would be performing better, but obviously with all of the issues that they've had, it's difficult for them to not keep shooting themselves in the foot. But Boeing Airlines has been down about 10% over the past year. But you have to thank, I'm sure the CEO of Boeing has to thank Trump for this, and maybe that was the purpose of the visit. It was actually a thank you visit. They're up about 33% since the election. I'm sure that's a result of what I'm certain will be an increase in defense spending, which Boeing Airlines is obviously a very major supplier of aircraft for the Air Force and actually all other branches of the military. But um, uh, again, they're they're doing well over the last 3 months, but I'm I'm just waiting for the next shoe to drop because it's just a matter of time before they stumble again. I'm sure the new Air Force One will be all that it needs to be, but there will be a lot of a lot of tears along the way. 2027 is the new projected delivery date. I would be very surprised if we hit that 2027 date. I would not be surprised to see that contract canceled. Um, I mentioned that I own shares of Boeing Airlines. I wanted to kind of I wanted to share a story. I'm a frequent visitor of One Life Fitness, the tech center location. I'm there just about every morning, every weekday morning. I tend to take the weekends off, but usually after a workout, I'll sit in the sauna. And a couple of months ago, I had a gentleman, a young man. I find it odd to say that. I don't feel like the get off my lawn old man, but I'm getting there. I am approaching my 50th birthday, so I guess just about everybody's a young man at this point. But I had a young man ask if I was in the market, and my default answer to that is usually no, because I am by no means an expert. Um, in a future episode, we'll be chatting with someone that I would say is much more educated about finance in general. I am, I probably should throw a FINRA SIPC disclaimer at the end of this episode and really all episode, because if you take my advice, you're an idiot. I know enough to be dangerous. So my default answer is usually no. But in this case, you know, it was no, but um, I like to kind of talk in general terms. So, he asked me what I thought about things like AI and technology and stuff like that. And one of the things that I find the most interesting about those technologies, yes, your Nvidias and your Metas and your Alphabet, aka Google, those are certainly beneficiaries of the AI revolution. But one of the things that you have to think about is they're um, they're not beneficiaries in a vacuum. Um, all of those models, um, all of them, even those from private slash public slash nonprofit slash for profit companies like OpenAI, require a ton of resources in order to be successful. And while the focus of a lot of people is on your Nvidia stocks, your Meta stocks, your Alphabet stocks, and all of those things are really good indicators of the success or failure of a product or service. You have to think about sort of the downline infrastructure that's required. So one of the areas that I've been interested in is power. Um, all of these models require a ton of compute resources, and those in turn require power, energy. So what's been happening over the last 12, 18, 24 months is there's been a steady increase in the um, the profitability of industries that are adjacent to AI, specifically in the area of power. Um, Sam Altman, the CEO, the the prophet of OpenAI, the profit or nonprofit arm of OpenAI. I don't even know anymore. He was tied very early on to a company by the name of Oklo. Their symbol is OKLO, and he um, was listed as the CEO for quite a while of Oklo. But what Oklo does is they develop, I don't want to say miniature, but scaled down mini nuclear reactors. They do not have a nuclear reactor. A lot of the current nuclear landscape is about proof of concept and getting to market. It takes about 10 years from concept to actual building of a nuclear reactor. But what this company specializes in is they're trying to bring to market these miniaturized nuclear power plants, which are very small in comparison to what you typically see, like your 3 Mile Island and your big giant stacks with the water vapor coming out of the top of them. These are much more miniaturized. Think more along the lines of the smaller reactors that are on satellites and space probes and things like that. Um, the benefit is obviously they produce a ton of electricity in a small footprint, but the concept is you put these nuclear reactors next to a data center so that you've got power on demand, clean. It's cleaner than coal. It's cleaner than diesel. It's cleaner than oil. Yes, there's nuclear waste and all that sort of stuff, but it's still considered a clean fuel. So shut up. Um, Put these small nuclear reactors next to data centers. Put them next to hospitals. Put them next to areas that require power uh, uh, strong, reliable, always available power, which this would qualify for. And by doing so, you take the burden off of your traditional power grid, your traditional dirty power plants and power generation facilities. So Oklo is one of several companies that are pursuing this avenue of sort of micronuclear fission reactors. I invested in them early on, and they've been growing very, very well. Again, this is not advice. Do not do anything with your money that you wouldn't otherwise do. Do not take advice from me on investment. That's your full disclosure. Full disclosure. Do not do anything that I tell you to do. So it the saga with Boeing and their inability to really cash in on their duopoly is something that came up during this Sonner Investor Center conversation. And ever since, every once in a while I'll run into him out in the gym floor, and our greetings, not hey, what's up, or hey dude, or fist bump. It's Oklo, so it's kind of weird. So yeah, that's the investment section of Jason's Knowledge Stack podcast. The third article that I saw is probably the most insane thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I swear this is a current news story. I had to verify it like 3 or 4 times, but apparently the alleged, I can't believe I'm saying that, the alleged suspect in the Tupac Shakur murder in 1996 seeks to delay his trial. 1996. That's 30 years ago. I'm dumbfounded by the fact that this trial hasn't happened yet, and that this person is seeking to delay the trial because there's apparently new evidence that somebody else might be involved. I don't know that this is a hot take. I think I may have heard this from somebody else, but I wouldn't be surprised if we start to find P. Diddy's fingerprints on the Tupac Shakur murders. I don't know. Maybe Tupac doesn't like baby oil as much as Puffy does. I don't know. Again, I don't know anything. This is just my opinion, but I don't know. But 30 years, I understand the system that we live in. There is a due process, and everyone is entitled to their day in court. I'm just not sure that day in court was meant to be 30 years after the actual crime was committed, or allegedly committed. I'm sorry. So I'm dumbfounded by that. So that's the news. All right. So let's talk about knowledge. Where do I get my knowledge? I get my knowledge from a lot of podcasts. Lately, it's been a lot of general knowledge podcasts. I consume a lot of podcasts about business, technology, finance. The industry that I'm most involved with, credit unions. I've been spending a lot of time with some specific smaller credit union and credit union advocacy group podcasts, different vendors that provide information security, finance, balance sheet management, even data analytics. Some of them are new. Some of them have been around for quite a while, and they have kind of a library of podcasts that are out there. The most popular podcast that I think I listen to is probably the Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett. Very good podcast. He provides a lot of interesting insight, or him and his guests provide interesting insight into being the CEO, starting a business, and just general knowledge about business and management, and a very kind of candid conversation about those topics. I also consume a number of podcasts from Dr. Scott Galloway, the Prof G Pod and the Prof G Markets are outstanding podcasts. Prof G Markets is I think, twice weekly podcast that does a really good job of kind of talking about some current events in the markets. I also listen to the Raging Moderates podcast with Scott Galloway and Jessica Tarlov. Jessica Tarlov is a Fox News contributor, the moderate um, uh, on that channel. She and Scott both kind of take a moderate to slightly left position on some the news of the day. They have some interesting guests. They talk about the impact of um, what's been happening lately with the new administration, and I find it interesting. I also listen to the On the Balance Sheet podcast from the Darling Consulting Group. DCG provides advisory services to tons of financial institutions about balance sheet management and economic modeling and forecasting. They do a fantastic job. They have a lot of good information about not just credit unions, but financial institutions in general. And their topics are pretty varied, always with a financial slant to it, but they cover everything from technology to regulation to the management style of different financial institutions. So that's a good listen as well. I also listen to the Q's podcast. Q's has a lot of really good information. Q's their podcast has been around for a bit. I think their episodes are a little slower. I think that's they come in waves. Like there'll be a podcast every month or so. I think the last one was from October or November. But Q's is the Credit Union Executive Society. So they have a lot of good information about credit union executive management and a lot of episodes regarding current events. I believe they have a pretty good episode on AI and augmenting staffing with AI tools and things like that. So those are a couple of the most popular ones that I like to consume. The internet, you have to certainly pick and choose. In general, I find that I don't watch TV as much as I used to. I spend a lot of time on YouTube. Now, there's a lot of garbage on YouTube. I like to consume content that is going to make me smarter, not dumber. Veritasium is an outstanding channel if you're just curious about science in general. I love watching those articles or those episodes because you learn something about something you wouldn't ordinarily learn about. About 50% of which I completely understand, and the rest of it is just, okay, move on to the next one. Outside of sort of career and podcast content, I obviously, as an executive at a financial institution, technology, business, finance are all pretty important to me. But even outside of all of that, I consume a ton of content. I like to I like to play with wood. I'm a very amateur DIY woodworker. The walls back here, these are all I did all of that. And it's cypress. It's milled down. This is this little stripe here. That's black walnut. That stripe back there is Padauk, and there's one over there that's bloodwood. And then over there will be Purple Heart at some point. But yeah, this is cypress that I acquired locally, milled it. So I like woodworking. So there are a number of woodworking channels that I watch. Katz Moses, John Malecki. John Malecki is a former Pittsburgh Steeler and a number of other teams, but his content's outstanding. Bourbon Moth Woodworking. I like content from those three guys. And then there's a podcast. It's called Aging Wheels. This podcast is about very strange vehicles. As of late, mostly electric. But if you want any information about a Trabant, which I'm sure you've never heard of before, I believe it's Ukrainian car company. I'm probably way off. But a lot of interesting, quirky, unusual stuff on that podcast or on that YouTube channel. So I find that I spend a lot of time just watching content from I guess content makers. One of the things that I learned from one of the more recent podcasts that I'd listened to, and this was about a week ago. I didn't even think it was a week ago. On the Diary of a CEO podcast, the guest was Alex Hormozi. He is he's a CEO. I don't even know how to describe him, but he had a lot of really interesting information about starting a business, about upscaling a business, and one of the things that I sort of found interesting about the podcast was they were him and Stephen Bartlett, the host of the DOAC podcast, was talking about their early days at starting their podcast, and the episodes were cringy, to say the least. Probably very similar to this podcast. But one of the things that they learned early on is that you can't beat someone else at being them. So emulating a Scott Galloway, or a Stephen Bartlett, or a Joe Rogan, emulating those folks, you're never going to beat them. You're never going to be them because they have the expertise. They have the domain expertise about being them. So don't even try. So I found that interesting, and that's why this podcast episode is quite a bit different than the first two. The first two were, essentially me reading from a teleprompter, which felt weird, felt alien. This, quite frankly, feels weird and alien too, but it's more me. Anybody who sits with me face to face, this is going to seem a lot more like me than those first two episodes were. And this is kind of how I want this podcast to go. I want it to be more of a conversation. While there's been a lot of stops and starts in this episode, and the edit, I'm sure, will bear that out, because I start going down a rabbit hole and I forget where I'm at and I have to come back to reality. They'll get better over time, but this is me, so I am the expert at being me. So as long as what I'm producing and what I'm presenting on camera is me, hand gestures, hand movements, smart comments, as long as all of those things are authentically me, then I think the podcast is going to have some authenticity to it. So bear with me. I'm figuring this out as I go along, including the technology and all that kind of stuff. So if this sounds like garbage, that would be why. So yeah, that's it for this podcast. I guess to give you a little bit of hope about some additional content, I've got a couple of things that are in the works. A conversation with a very smart local college professor about systems thinking, and talking about kind of within an organization or within life, for that matter. There's no reason why the systems thinking thing can't be a life lesson. We're going to talk about systems thinking and ensuring that all the peoples and all of the parts and all of the moving pieces within a system is all singing from the same hymnal, or to use another metaphor, all of the ships are sailing in the same direction. And another upcoming episode, we'll talk about when is it too early or too late to start investing and planning for your future. That episode will be with a very smart financial planner whom I work with regularly. I have another episode, which will probably be the next one, regarding how a young person, I don't know what age that that should be, but how you go from, your Chick-fil-A, your table waiting, your server, your service career when you're younger. You're basically looking for any gig that'll pay the bills, DoorDash, gig economy, all of those sorts of things. How do you make the pivot, the transition to a career? And what are some of the pitfalls and what are some of the things that, someone like myself that's in a position to hire younger folks, folks that are just starting out with their careers, how can I, as someone in management, help someone in that group along? And what are some of the things that make it unintentionally more difficult for them to be successful? And then another podcast, another episode that I'm interested in getting scheduled is one that will speak to a local, semi-local credit union that has experienced tremendous growth in the past 12 months. They've been on LinkedIn, and I want to talk to them about how they decided to be very aggressive in the span of a year to scale up their organization tremendously. So a lot of good stuff that's kind of up in the air that I'm looking to get scheduled. I've made some progress in getting this studio to where I feel like I can have some people here to have kind of a one-on-one conversation, but don't be surprised if some of those are via Teams. But I'm also looking for ideas and suggestions from you, my devoted 35, 40 person audience about potential topics. I will be at I'm not supposed to call it CUNA anymore, but I will be at the Government Affairs Conference for America's Credit Unions. I believe that's the actual name for it. So I'll certainly be open to making some connections there with, vendors and partners and organizations that I deal with on a regular basis. So potential opportunity for, recording a hotel room episode potentially. I don't know. We'll see. But feel free to reach out. Contact information is in the show notes. Thanks for watching or listening. If you haven't, please subscribe. I think that does something. So at some point when this becomes more than, 30 or 40 people watching these episodes, I'm sure that will be helpful to monetizing this and to getting sponsors. I don't know. Right now, I'm just happy if one person listens and learns something from it. So thanks again for watching and listening, and I look forward to the next episode. Take care.